Most of us have heard of the seven wonders of the ancient world. I'm going to highlight three of them today, the three that I found personally most impressive. Frankly, there's no time to cover all seven. The ancient wonders are all examples of how people in the past, without our modern technology, could overcome that and still build these massive, colossal structures, basically by hand. The three I'm going to cover are the Great Pyramid of Giza, Colossus of Rhodes, and the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus. So the Pyramid of Giza was built in 2560 BC, so it was 4,500 years ago. It took 2.3 million limestone blocks from 2 to 30 tons each, some were as much as 70 tons, and this was all moved by hand. They had about 200,000 laborers working at a time, split up into different size groups. And it was covered with 144,000 casing stones, which were all almost perfectly flat and polished to a mere finish. They were actually removed in the Middle Ages to build other buildings, so that's why they're not left anymore. Except at the very top, you can kind of see some. It's filled with passages and chambers that honeycomb through it, such as the King's Chamber up top, which is probably where the tomb was, but yeah, the pyramid was raided and a lot of stuff was stolen, so there's not much left inside. It's so much stone that even in the middle of the desert, it's 68 degrees inside year-round, so which is kind of neat. The pharaoh's tomb, the pharaoh's name was Khufu, and it's also the only wonder of the ancient world that still stands today, and it's also the oldest and biggest, so it's kind of interesting. I guess he achieved his goal of eternal life. Colossus of Rhodes was built on the island of Rhodes. It was a statue to the Greek god Helios, which is the god of the sun. And it was built in 292 to celebrate a victory over invading Greek forces, and it's kind of insult to injury. They took all their weapons and equipment that they left behind, melted them down, made a statue out of them. So it's 107 feet high. It's one of the tallest statues in the ancient world. It was made out of iron with a bronze skin filled with stone, and to build the top levels, they had to build a ramp around it out of dirt, which they then washed away. It took 12 years to build. Unfortunately, it only stood for 56 years. It was destroyed by an earthquake, and it snapped at the knees. But it lay on the ground for 800 years when it was eventually, it was a huge tourist attraction. Pliny the Elder wrote about it. And when it broke, King Ptolemy III offered to rebuild it, but the Rhodians were afraid they had offended Helios, so they decided it was best to leave it where it lay. Eventually, it was broken apart and it was sold off. The story goes a Muslim merchant sold it to a Jewish somebody, which just it was written by Christians, so that just played into the anti-Semitism at the time. Also, an interesting fact about it is the Statue of Liberty was built to what we think are the dimensions and size of it, and the poem New Colossus is taken from it, inspired by it, so it still kind of lives on today. The Temple of Artemis at Ephesus was built to the Greek goddess Artemis, who was the goddess of the hunt, but the Ephesians had their own version of her. She's also the goddess of the moon. It was built in 550 BC. It took 120 years to build. It was a little bit bigger than a football field, 377 feet long and 180 feet wide and 60 feet tall. Now this temple was destroyed 3 different times, and they kept rebuilding it. First time Herostratus destroyed it, and his goal was to be famous no matter what it took, which is where the term herostratic fame at any cost comes from. The Greeks responded by killing him and banning his name from any use, but then this guy named Theopompus decided he would write it down, so he kind of achieved his goal there. They rebuilt it. It was destroyed again in 268 by the Goth raid. Rebuilt again. It appeared in the Bible. St. John prayed at it, cracked the altar, knocked half the temple down, and it stood till 400 AD when St. John Chrysostom knocked it down with the mob. That's a statue of Artemis. Anyway, so the ancient wonders were colossal. They're examples of how much people can do without any technology, and they survive today in our history and in our modern folklore and all that, and the Statue of Liberty and such. Giza was the biggest, the oldest, still around. Colossus stands in the form of a statue, and Temple of Artemis is just a column.